You're anti-trans.
Anyway, we need to move on. Stop trying not to be racist. I don't have to try not to be racist, okay? Oh my god. This title is extremely concerning, so I don't know. We'll see. Listen, I'm not prejudging. Why? What is it with fucking trans video essayists? Hang on. Let's see if I can do it. Did I nail it? I'm gonna be a video essayist now.
Alright. Hi everyone. If you're watching this video, it's likely you're looking for information about puberty blockers, something that has come up in media quite a lot recently.
Now, the High Court has ruled that children under 16
Oh my god, is that Hugh Edwards? Jesus fucking Christ.
who say they want to change gender are unlikely to be able to give their informed
Out of breath before starting the listen, almost none of us actually do sports. So when we talk about how we need to be in sports, it's like we're talking about like 3 people.
consent to treatment with drugs that block puberty.
Maybe you're a child looking for information about puberty blockers. Maybe you're a parent that is looking about whether or not puberty blockers are safe or not. Either way, you're in the right place. Today's video is a bit different than the usual. Typically, my videos aren't aimed at children, although you're more than welcome to watch, but this video is more aimed towards parents. But this one is about children as a category, and how we, as adults, relate to them, especially when it comes to medicine. And so if this is the first time you're watching a video of mine, hello, my name is Mulder, and today we're going to...
Listen, when I go completely insane, I'm just gonna use all this fucking material I've built up and literally just make fucking YouTube poops out of them. I'm gonna make people say all sorts. I've been doing it a bit with shorts anyway, so it won't be too much of a sidestep. But hey, I don't know, that's future stuff. I'm still getting used to the short stuff. It's gonna be a bit ratchet for a while. But hey, we're getting somewhere.
talk about puberty blockers. But before we get to that, let's go into basics. You see, there's this thing called puberty that can afflict your child. Now, puberty...
Why do I need this explaining to me?
...is, for the most part, a completely normal and healthy part of a child's development. It happens to pretty much everyone, but there are some complications.
Can I, listen, I know this video is 3 years old. Can I give, like, a word of advice? Your audience don't need to literally have puberty explained to them. Just get to it, you know what I mean? It makes me impatient, and I don't like being impatient.
Sometimes, puberty can be characteristic. Children feel his voice might drop. Sometimes, with reason, puberty is scary for everyone. And I do want to preface it by saying that some kids who do exhibit some discomfort in their puberty grow out of it. Not everyone ends up being trans after puberty, and that is fine. Others, however, won't. And while
almost everyone doesn't end up being fucking trans. Is that a cyberpunk reference? Depends who it came from. If it was from me, then definitely not.
Want to transition to live as the gender that they identify as, including physically. And that is where puberty blockers come in. Now, on the surface, it may seem like a very easy issue here. You take a medicine, you don't have your puberty, and that's basically it. These medicines do as the name says. They slow the onset of puberty, as well as reduce the effect that puberty is having on your body. And this can obviously be very helpful if you want to transition later in life, because you won't have to undo a puberty that you didn't want anyway.
As if adults haven't also undergone puberty, just over trying to be smart. Yeah, it's tiring. The squared wide cut. I don't know. It's making the chest look very kind of rectangular, and rectangular is not how you want a female chest to look, you know what I mean? Studies show most kids grow out of it. Yeah, most of them do. I think there was a new one this year. I think it was like Singh et al. Or something. I've got a bunch of stuff noted. But yeah, there's even like recent things. And then, hey, there was that study that was supposed to come out about puberty blockers that got suppressed by its own author because they were worried about it being politicized. So, make your own conclusion from that. And also, hey, like the stream.
Seems pretty easy, right? But there's been some controversy here.
What about comparing people in the trans debate to speaking out?
Seems pretty easy. Well, that's exactly the fucking problem, because you just think you can just switch puberty off like a light switch. Not necessarily this person, but it feels like people do. You know what I mean?
against Nazis. I mean, that's pretty extreme.
Well, there's a couple of parallels.
If you paid attention to trans-use media recently, you may be aware that a lot of medical practitioners and some governments are heavily arguing against puberty blockers as a type of medicine, arguing that children should not be given them, which might make you think, oh no, what has happened? Has a study come out and said that puberty blockers will harm our children?
No, they just keep coming out saying that puberty blockers are not actually improving mental health in any demonstrable way. There was one study that disagreed, that kickstarted the whole thing, that a lot of the other studies seem to be disagreeing with. An example is the Carmichael study in the UK. Yeah.
It's a bit more complicated. The issue that we're dealing with is twofold. One, are puberty blockers safe? And second, does it matter?
As far, what do you mean, does it matter? Why does it need to be a fucking philosophy tube segment? Does it matter if they're safe? Well, yes, because it's fucking children having them. Children that supposedly are being given them for its time to think. So it's not even just trans kids that will be having them. Only it's not really time to think, because it's usually in conjunction with like affirmation, with like social transition and stuff. It doesn't matter. Like, yes, it does, obviously. Why even ask that? Of course it should be safe.
And second, does it matter? And that second point is something that I'm going to come back to a bit later. But you're here for the science, the cold, hard facts. Are puberty blockers safe? After all, that's all that matters, right? Who cares about the politics of it all? We should just be sure that we're giving our children
It shouldn't even be politicized. The fact that it is kind of sucks. And unfortunately, this kind of trans rights movement is a big problem with that. Because they're most of the people fucking politicizing it, quite honestly.
medicines that are safe, that are practical. And we should do this with the least amount of risk possible. And that is something I think everyone can agree on. So let's quickly talk about...
Then why even ask the question of does it matter? You're saying yes.
What puberty blockers are. So when we're talking about puberty blockers, we need to define what exactly it is we're talking about. The pure scientific stuff. But I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a doctor. I'm an historian by education and a YouTuber by trade, so take what I'm saying here with a pinch of salt. You should always be critical of the media you consume. Puberty blockers are a type of medicine that are called gonadotropin releasing hormone agonist. The chemical process behind these medicines are very easy. GnRH agonists act as agonists of the GnRH receptor, the biological target of gonadotropin releasing hormone. These drugs are called GnRH and they exist under many different brand names. But the one you're most likely to encounter is probably a brand name called Lupron. These medicines can be applied in two instances, either prescribed by doctors at gender identity clinics who see that a puberty blocker would be beneficial for the child, that they would find some use out of it, or that they would find some comfort in having more time to think about their...
Despite plenty of studies showing little actual benefit and more side effects than what we seem to think. But hey, I don't know if this person's going to talk about side effects. I don't know if this person's going to use the word reversible, especially the words fully reversible. We'll have to see.
Gender identity before deciding whether or not they are trans or not. They can also be given out as part of informed consent, where children can be informed of the risks and decide for themselves whether or not they want to accept it. But that takes an emotional maturity, and that is a subject that I'm also going to be tackling a bit later. These medicines are prescribed to children who suffer from a discomfort relating to puberty. Studies have shown that this helps children feel more at ease in their bodies and reduces levels of depression and anxiety. Even
that's not really what people are fucking finding, is it?
in cases where children don't end up being trans. Typically, these medicines come in two forms. One is an injectable, and the other is an implant. The injectable medicine can be injected once a month, once every 3 months, or even longer. The implant, however, is something that you put in your arm, and it slowly releases the medicine over the course of an entire year. This medication works by blocking the release of sex hormones, things like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and that is what, in essence, prevents puberty from occurring. Because if you remember your middle school biology, puberty is sort of driven by these hormones. So far, so good. But here's where we reach our first point of common misunderstanding. These medications weren't developed for this purpose. They weren't developed for trans youth in the first place at all.
Are we going to say that they were developed for prostate cancer, or are we going to say they were developed for precocious puberty?
And this medication can be used for a multitude of other health issues as well, because what they are designed to...
Hey, maybe both. I like her glasses. I think they'd be too square for my face. I've never really found any glasses that suit me, to be honest. Supposedly I have like slight astigmatism. I don't know, I wore glasses to start with because I get headaches from screens sometimes, but I don't really like how the ones I have look, to be honest.
To do can have multiple effects depending on whatever health issue you have. Another common application of this medicine is also in young cis girls. Girls who have undergone puberty a bit too soon, which can have adverse effects on your body and your health. These medicines then slow the
Can it then have adverse effects if you have puberty too late? Let's see if we hear anything about that.
down and let young girls get into puberty in a bit more typical pace. That's because puberty isn't the same for everyone. Oftentimes, young girls will begin their puberty earlier than is typical, sometimes as young as 5 years old or younger, which...
Wait, how can they often experience something that isn't typical? Wouldn't that mean that they're... I don't know.
Obviously is a bit quick and can have multiple health risks associated with it. Puberty blockers work the same way here, by suppressing the hormone that triggers puberty, until such a point as the child is ready, typically at around age 11 or 12. It's still a puberty blocker, but not for any fancy pants transgender reason, and I think that's important.
See, it's a different thing. How did we get this right years ago and now we can't? I've got to talk to retards like fucking Torrin and Max, telling me that precocious puberty and a trans person going through puberty is the same fucking thing. Like, we knew this in fucking 2021. Why are we like, how have we gone backwards? To be honest, you know, kudos for this, because this is correct. We're worse at this now than we used to be. Our arguments are literally going backwards.
Important, because these are not trans medicines. This is just
Thank you.
normal medicine. But because these medicines restrict
You know what? This person's based as fuck. I don't need to listen to anymore.
the release of hormones, they are also used in other health conditions where hormones are important, such as breast cancer, endometriosis, prostate cancer. And that last part can sound
There we go. So, reasonably honest, at least. That's a good thing.
scary sometimes.
You're not seriously trying to say that children going to the doctor and saying that they're worried about their gender is akin to children being experimented on in Nazi concentration camps?
I'm afraid I
Well, I mean, Nazi concentration camps. I don't know what the context for this was, but they are being experimented on. There's not really all that much data about like the trans kids thing. The whole protocol is based on one study that's had several attempts to recreate that have failed, which is not good, you know. That's kind of ideally not what we want at all.
am, because Lupron, which is a drug that's supposed to be meant for end-stage cancer prostate cancer treatment, is being given to young girls.
Hey Graham, not every cancer treatment is as tough as chemo. This is actual medicine, not a class on script writing by Tommy Wiseau. I did not read the study. I did not read it. I did not. That's a bad joke, wow. But obviously I would be amiss if
Yeah, that was terrible.
I presented these puberty blockers as...
I mean, also it's very easy to shit on someone like Graham Linehan by taking things out of context and stuff. And I guess you need to simp for an order. Oh, he's fucking back. Why do we need Graham Linehan throughout this video? Like, I don't know. That seems like pandering to me.
as perfectly fine medications. They are, after all, pretty strong medications, and they do have side effects. And that's where the rub is regarding safety. Are these side effects acceptable or not? So let's dig into them. And this is a part of the video where I wish I had a smoking gun, but that's not how science often works. There are, unfortunately, a lot of...
Yeah, we're kind of betraying our bias here, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this person wants them to be considered safe, but at the same time, I don't know. So far, I can't complain too much about her approach, apart from that. I read 7 different studies going back to the 90s on Lupron. Graham was right; these drugs are bad. You should share some in the Discord sometime. It'd be good to look at that.
unknowns. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. Most scientific studies will not do a comprehensive, holistic review of how medicine works, the effect of side effects, long-term consequences. Oftentimes, studies will focus on a very narrow field, and that is the data that we have. Various narrow slices. And if you only look at one of those slices at a time, it can feel like there are a lot of unknowns, and therefore we shouldn't take any risks. But if you ask people who do this sort of thing for a living, they'll mostly tell you that many of the risks are a bit overblown. But they do exist, and that's important to grant too.
Yep, and you never think it'll be you, and then your kid's the one that gets the side effects, and then it's like, oh shit. Or you get put on them, you get affirmed by literally everyone, so you end up transitioning, and then you realize you weren't trans, but you've already had a mastectomy, and you've got facial hair, and your voice is forever 2 octaves lower than it used to be. But, you know, no big deal.
People object to the use of puberty blockers for health reasons, and sometimes they do have a point. So let's dig in to those points. Let's start with a very common objection to puberty blockers, that it makes your bones fragile. There are some studies that have mentioned that without the flow of a normal puberty, bones and muscles don't grow as strong as they would otherwise.
Yeah, you get like stunted growth, you get like atrophy down there, you know, like what is it? Osteoporosis, that's the one. That's a huge risk for me. Like if I don't take my estrogen, then I can potentially get that.
This is because sex hormones usually accelerate the growth of muscles and bone and sinew. But the vast majority of those studies also say that this only really happens in long-term use of these puberty blockers. That is because bone grows very slowly. And many of the people who do use puberty blockers are not going to use them for as long of a time where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, but don't they then take other things? Like that also might cause bone density problems? I'm against puberty blockers in children, but Graham is not right. The Nazi comparisons have to stop. Jews are begging to be freed. The kids are begging doctors and doctors. Yeah, possibly. I agree about the Nazi comparisons. The thing is, though, like, I guess we're kind of harkening back to, like, Weimar Germany and Nazi experiments. I don't know. It's an appeal to emotion. I agree with that kind of thing either, to be honest.
Problem. But that's not to say that some won't. Looking at the long-term effect, there is some reduced bone density.
Brain stunting. I've heard a little bit about that.
But this is something that you can fix very easily by using a very complicated scientific method known as checking in. As part of the healthcare package that you're getting into when you start getting into trans-related healthcare, means that you're going to talk to doctors who will check up on your bones to make sure that they're developing healthfully. And
I don't know if it's different between child transition and adult transition. My bones have never been checked. No one's checked my bones.
And if there is an issue with bone density, your doctor can deal with that as well. And one of the ways to deal with that...
This hinges on them doing it correctly and doing it properly and not like rushing people in any way, surely. Oh, hi Larixal, how you doing?
...might be to stop the puberty blockers. And that's just because sometimes puberty blockers are not going to be worth the risk. In addition to this, bone growth is actually expected to slow down on blockers. And many studies don't actually track the effect of what happens to...
Oh, here she is, Joanna Olsen Kennedy. Did a whole ass study about puberty blockers. Didn't release it because of political reasons. There was a New York Times article I tried to look at and it didn't work. But Sky Vitterity has a video on it, and I watched it and it was good.
The bone growth after starting a puberty, be that natural or via hormone replacement therapy. This becomes a problem because, as we know, bones grow more during puberty. But a delayed puberty will also mean a delayed bone density growth, which is normal. And we can see this in the study about cisgender girls who simply began puberty at different ages. And we can see that those who begin puberty later also have reduced bone density than the norm. There are also some questions regarding cognitive development.
Oh, is she from Sweden? JOK. Oh, yeah. Other than the bias, she's being incredibly honest. I don't have too much issue so far. There's definitely stuff I disagree with. But this definitely isn't the worst thing I've ever watched, for sure. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll watch something and it's like, I think this person is like a terrible person. I don't really get that feeling watching this person. Maybe it's because we slightly look similar and that's literally all there is to it, but I don't know.
Again, many unknowns. Some early studies have claimed that short-term use has been...
Many unknowns on this medication that we're going to give to children for mostly a cosmetic thing, mostly for mental health when the data isn't really there to say that it even helps with mental health.
Exclusively known to not affect cognitive development, but long-term effects are still unknown. One study from 2017 claimed that there were no effects on cognition due to these medications.
And like, I don't know, a certain point in this video's favor is that I just remember people around this time, you know, mid 2021, people I knew running around talking about how amazing and how completely reversible these like puberty blockers were. Like making out as if it's almost too good to be true. Do you know why that is? It's because it was too good to be true.
But there might be some signs of damaged cognition in animal studies. And while that's not a great sign, it's worth mentioning that children are not sheep. You'd think that this would be enough to do more testing, but that's sometimes impossible to do. That's because there's no way to do control groups here. This is a critical topic for transgender youth and their families. It is also a difficult topic to study, because we would never randomly assign transgender youth to treatment and no treatment groups. That would be harmful and unethical.
So this is a common argument. I think the main counter really is, does that mean that we should have to rely on less good evidence just because we can't get stronger evidence? Because the thing about relying on testimonial is people lie. People embellish their stories. People tell you what they want you to hear, not what's actually true of them. You know what I mean?
So while there are unknowns, this is as much as we can know at this stage. And what we know...
And if you're wondering why people would lie, I don't know, sunk cost fallacy, things like that. Very easy to get very invested in your own transition in that way. You get very emotionally invested. It becomes a part of you, and you become very defensive when people question it, you know, far in excess of almost anything else. And I know this because I used to be one of those people.
No, from that 2017 study, seems to indicate that it's fine. But it should be said that every single study after that one has not had any conclusive evidence about cognitive development. That's not to say that it has a negative effect. It also means that it hasn't had a positive effect. It means we don't know. But it also means that...
It means that it's still then experimental in some ways. But we've been using it on kids, again, for not even fixing a problem, depending on who you're talking about or talking to, you know what I mean?
Throughout the entire time when people have been using these medications, nothing has come up to indicate that they have an effect on cognitive development at all. Because remember, it's not just trans children using these medications. There's also a question about fertility. These medicines do prevent the production of sex cells, cells that are needed to produce the miracle of life. And the idea is that if you, as a child, take these medications, you're not going to be fertile anymore. And obviously, that can be...
The impression I got from puberty blockers that were reversible when I started my transition and brought into initially. Yeah, I mean, I knew people. There was like a trans space or whatever in town for years. Like, it was there before I moved here even. And like, this is the kind of thing they'd push on like social media. You know, all these ideas that we should be entitled about our pronouns and go ham on every single tiny issue instead of picking our battles, which, you know, I fundamentally disagreed with back then. I even more disagree with it now because us going ham on every issue has made things worse. So I don't know. But these people had big platforms on like Facebook and things like that, Instagram, and they'd share this kind of misinfo constantly. It's like, it's propaganda. You've changed your mind. Fair enough. Yeah. No, I mean, I never really believed it all that much. I think I was starting to get to the point where I was becoming extremely cynical. And like, I don't know. By the time I started hearing the puberty blockers lies, I was already starting to wonder what was actually true with anything these people were saying. You know what I mean?
Be a pretty big deal because you might want children in the future. But here's the thing. These medications are reversible. There may be some slight effect to fertility.
So they're usually reversible rather than reversible then?
Which obviously isn't great. But that's also why in many cases doctors will ask patients to...
It's obviously not great. Yeah, don't worry about whoever's child that certainly isn't yours. That's possibly getting fucked up by this, I guess. Going after kids was the worst idea ever. Yes, very much so.
To cryogenically freeze sex cells before starting puberty blocking treatment. Because one of the earliest stages of puberty is...
What are the odds of them surviving once you need them, like thawing them out? What are the odds of that?
Developing those cells. That means taking eggs and taking sperm and sticking them in a freezer. Stages in puberty are classified according to...
Yeah, but is that a what's the word? Is that a done deal? Is that like how reliable is it? How often do these things fail? Sorry, I'm miles away from my desk for some reason. Just give me a sec. Yeah, because she's kind of talking like that as if, you know, I'll just do this and it's fine. It's a bit like that Luxander video, except at least Mia here is not telling someone after the fact. You know, oh, why didn't you just do this and that and the other? Yeah, if only you told them that fucking 5 years ago. You know what? We'll come back to that. I'll keep thinking about that.
There's something called the Tanner scale, and it's only after Tanner stage.
Tanner stage 2, by the way. Interesting clip of Marcy Bowers out there saying that all the male patients that they gave puberty blockers to and started their transition from there, none of them have sexual function now.
2, around age 12, when children can even be prescribed puberty blockers to deal with gender dysphoria. This is because gender dysphoria in children can sometimes resolve itself, but if it remains...
Yeah, and if you let them carry on through this, it might also resolve itself, but you're not giving them that chance, you know?
After this stage, it is often permanent. This means that puberty blockers are only prescribed in stage 3, the same stage where sex cells are produced, but just before most secondary sexual characteristics develop.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Get420. A video on sexual planning was awful the last time. This is the first time I've ever seen anything by her, so I don't know.
And this way, fertility is...
Do they only last 3 years for cum freezing? I have no idea. It feels like it's very easy to just say, I'll just freeze your sperms. But it's like, well, what if that doesn't work? What then? You know what I mean? About 50% of sperm survive the freezing process, and success rates of pregnancy using frozen sperm are 30 to 50%. Okay, fair enough. I'll have to confirm that, but yeah, thank you.
Is preserved even in the eventuality that these medications would adversely affect your fertility, which they don't. But this leads me to the final argument: sexual characteristics develop. And this way, fertility is preserved even in the eventuality that these medications would adversely affect your fertility, which they don't. But this...
Yeah, but they lead on to things that will. Imagine never enjoying sex again being a side effect of treating gender dysphoria. Fuck that. To be fair, plenty of people have that issue when it comes to depression. Like, I don't know about other people, but most antidepressant medications I've tried, it's like, yeah, I'm never gonna fuck again, I guess. Nice. I hate the argument that kids can just freeze their eggs or sperm. You're literally dooming them to need further medical intervention if they want to have a family. That is true, yes. For freezing eggs, it's about 4% success rate for egg. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This is what I mean. It's very easy to just say, I'll just do this. But hey, this is stuff that costs money. It's stuff that takes time. It's stuff that might not work. If it doesn't, and by the time you find out that it doesn't, you know, it's too late. Like, what do you do then? You know what I mean? I don't know. There's so many, like, issues with this whole thing that it feels like we're not even able to go into as much detail as we'd like to on, maybe. Although this video is less than an hour long, she could have made it longer for sure, and maybe spent less time asking whether it matters. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bit ridiculous.
This leads me to the final argument.
Oh, hi, Amaya. Hope you're doing well.
That doctors are experimenting on children. I mean, if we don't know the effects, aren't we just testing these on kids, seeing what happens? We don't know what's going to happen. It's...
More or less, yeah. What are you going to say? Oh, well, that's the same with lots of things. That doesn't make it good in those either. But let's see. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's a mystery, isn't it? We have no idea.
Children are basically being experimented on with puberty blockers.
It's a moral panic.
Bruv, it is experimental medication. The whole protocol is based on one study that has not been replicated, despite people trying.
We're experimenting on children. It's just like the Nazis.
You didn't even say Nazis that time.
These comparisons annoy me quite a lot. But
I wonder how much the comparisons between, like, anyone remotely anti-trans and Nazis, I wonder if those comparisons also bother her. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Do see where they're coming from. If you don't have a clear and simple answer about both the short and long-term effects of a medication on a child, but you're still...
If you like the stream, you should consider liking the stream.
...prescribing it to them, you could see why some people would think it would be tantamount to experimentation.
Well, yeah, very much so, because it is very experimental.
especially if you were under the impression that these medications are brand new. And it should be said that in the case of prescribing it to block...
It's still experimental even if they're new, even if they're not new, should I say. Precocious puberty is not the same as being a so-called trans child, nor is breast cancer or prostate cancer. That's the one. There we go.
The onset of puberty because of transgender reasons is something that is moderately new. These medications are not. These medications have been around for over several decades.
That doesn't make their use not experimental.
Also, why would doctors experiment on kids? I feel like this argument is often...
Why? Fuck's sake, man. I mean, like, if if it's like sanctioned, if that's the official way to treat the kids, then yeah, they will fucking experiment on them, because that's kind of how it works, unfortunately. And besides which, plenty of like other treatments for things are also very experimental and arguably not great.
And stemmed from a very American view of the pharmaceutical system, where...
I'm going to be honest, Nick, she did earlier point out that precocious puberty and trans puberty are not the same thing. So hopefully not.
Pharmaceutical companies will do anything to make money.
I think what she's more doing is being like, well, we use this stuff for other people already, so it's not experimental, when actually they're not used for the same thing. So it kind of still is, you know? Excuse me. And I mean, the other thing that makes it experimental is purely the fact that we have the Dutch protocol say one thing and then other studies say another thing. So it's like, well, yeah, when we've got different studies saying completely different things, or at least somewhat different things, then yeah, of course it's experimental. Experimental even on adults. Yeah. Well, there's plenty of treatments that are.
Out of their patients, which is true, but trans children are a minority of a very small minority. And if you wanted to make money, they'd probably just convince us that opium helps cure depression.
Well, no. If they wanted to make money, they'd just convince as many people as possible that they're trans and make it into this, like, trendy fucking shit. You know what I mean? That's okay, Nick. Don't worry. Like, I try and be honest. I do think this person is showing substantial bias, but this isn't the worst thing I've seen. Like, I have some issues, and I'm voicing them as I go, I guess.
Transgender reasons is something that is moderately new. These medications are not. These medications have been around for over several decades. Also, why would doctors experiment on kids? I feel like this argument is often...
Why would they experiment on kids? I don't know. Because there's a demand for it and we don't have any better ideas. That seems to be the main thing. And hey, the demand has gone even crazier since whenever this was made. So maybe there's not enough of them to make it a cash cow. It's become a cash cow for people. Like, that's just how it is. The amount of people that think they're trans now, when before it was a completely different demographic, it was more males than females as opposed to the other way around now. Everything's completely changed. All of this is fucking experimental. You know? Like, all these ideas about, like, gender identity, it's like, I mean, it's not experimental, it's fucking philosophical, but it's just stuff that people come up with, and barely any of it has been really tried on society. You know what I mean?
Stemmed from a very American view of the pharmaceutical system, where pharmaceutical companies will do anything to make money out of their patients, which...
It's more the surgeons, I think, but I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies that make puberty blockers and shit, I'm sure they've done just fine off of them.
It's true, but trans children are a minority of a very small minority.
Yeah, this is a dumb point. I do not agree with this at all.
And if you wanted to make money, they'd probably just convince us that opium helps cure depression.
No, they made money off the trans shit.
Which, this is despite...
Yeah, I'm glad we've made a very not apt analogy. But truthfully, lots of people have made money off of this shit, you know what I mean?
As I've already mentioned, these medications being as tested and as ethically secured as they can be.
If kids can work in long hours batching chicken for Tyson Foods, why can't they trans? I can't even tell if you're being serious.
Anything else would require actual experimentation on children, which would be unethical. In addition to this, it's also really important to mention that every single medication has side effects. There's not a single medication in the world that doesn't have any.
Yeah, medications. How many medications do we use on children that have side effects, though?
Any side effects. The trick is, though,
And one of the side effects is literally dependent on when you take it, how long you take it for. There's a lot of pressure. And it seems like people are... What's the word I'm looking for? Fucking hell. It kind of seems like people are funneled a specific way. Doctors should monitor and manage children until they turn 18, and then maybe at that point transition could be an option. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not for transing kids, so...
To be able to monitor, track, and contain them. If you're taking a powerful medicine...
And that's the other problem. Do you think there's been enough, like, monitoring? It kind of... Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. It kind of seems to me like there hasn't been enough, and that people have just been, like, pushed through, probably because there's a high demand. And that's one way of dealing with high demand. Ask the fucking Tavistock clinic. But ultimately, that's kind of... My brain is, like, fucking dying.
Trick is, though, to be able to monitor, track...
Yeah, ultimately, it kind of seems like, no, there hasn't been the amount of monitoring. In fact, the UK government has the same problem, because the GICs in the UK, they just discharge you once you've had your surgery, and they don't even talk to you anymore.
And contain them. If you're taking a powerful medicine, you're going to have to talk to your doctor fairly often.
Okay, I'm probably against that too, if that helps.
Even me, just taking my normal hormone replacement therapy, have to go to the hospital and give blood samples at least once a year, so that they can make sure that my bones are okay. Instead, we judge which medications are worth the risk of side effects, and which medications aren't. The ones who aren't given to patients. And even with all of these concerns dealt with, there is still no overarching...
Jazz Jennings is a poster child for why puberty blockers are not a good idea, and her story was on national television. Was that before 2021?
Arching rule for how to deal with trans children, so to say. That sounded really ominous. There's no one rule.
Amish kids don't transition a lot. But what about them is always fun. Yes, that's fair enough. Grannyhausen by proxy. I had a post-op follow-up, but after that, I haven't had word from the GIC I went to. I literally had what was it? My hormones got stopped because they stopped talking to me, and then my new GP was confused as to why I was on them, and then I had to go through a whole bunch of shit trying to get my GIC and my GP to talk to each other. It was like fucking maddening. Like, all my audio is fluctuating like a gender fluid people. Okay, some people say it sounds fine, some people don't. I don't know. Maybe try reloading the stream or something. I'm not sure. Run it at a slightly lower quality or something.
For how to treat trans children.
You still can't hear me. Okay, try unmuting. Try plugging your speakers in. Try turning the volume off of 0. I don't know.
The sense of there's no one rule how to treat anyone. That's why you have to talk to a lot of doctors before they will give you your medication.
But we shouldn't generalize.
Because they have to figure out if you, specifically you, are going to benefit from the medication that you're taking.
Are they figuring that out? I remember... I don't know what it's like for puberty blockers and stuff like that. Maybe if I watched more detransition people, I'd get more of a feel for it. But I remember that, like, the surgeons would be like... the surgeons, there was WPATH surgeons that are like, oh yeah, the only person I didn't operate on, they were literally hallucinating during the consultation. That was the one person that I wouldn't treat. So I don't know. It kind of sounds like... you know, I kind of had to get mine renewed. I have to get mine renewed at some point because I re-registered with a new GP, but I kind of like not taking them. Are you like post-op? Because the one thing with like, the one thing with blocking your testosterone is that you can actually end up with things like osteoporosis if you aren't creating anything else, if you know what I mean. Like, I could get issues with osteoporosis and other stuff if I don't take my hormones because I'm post-op like since 7 years ago. So like, I don't produce anything.
And that goes for children too. That means that under the same rule set, different children are going to receive different treatment depending on what they
Is this how it actually plays out though?
need. And that is something that is decided by doctors and counselors and experts in the field.
Experts in the field, here we go. Experts in the field. Yikes. This is the problem. This is always what it comes back to. It's whether you trust the experts or not. Listen to Seth, detrans after PB. I have to look at that one. But yeah, trust the experts. I don't trust any of the experts. That fucking Michael Gove quote about not trusting experts with acronymed whatever was actually secretly extremely based. possibly not in the original context, I can't remember, because I don't really see the point in Brexit, but in more of a general sense, it's one of the most base things that anyone has ever said ever.
Some children might just want a few months to figure things out. Well,
see, the problem is when the experts have their own agenda, and when they want to push a certain way of doing things that is affirmational and patient-led, it kind of, to me, what she's describing doesn't really play out in practice, you know? Like, it's like we're describing ideally how it should work, when that's not really it, you know?
other children might feel so mentally unwell by the prospect of undergoing biological puberty that they need this medication to stay.
Do they need this medication or do they need counseling?
Mentally healthy. And because of gender dysphoria,
why doesn't the data show that it helps them then?
Varies from person to person, the effects of puberty blockers will also vary in their effectiveness, because they're effectively treating different things. Every child is, after all, unique, a small child from God. And it's also important to mention
what was that?
Things. Every child is, after all, unique, a small child from God. And it's also important to mention things. Every child is, after all, unique, a small child from God. And it's also important to
I'm confused. Anyway.
mention here that puberty blockers are not the same thing as hormone replacement therapy. Puberty blockers on their own do not cause a transition.
Yes, but what happens to the vast majority of kids that go on puberty blockers? They go on to transition. And like, a huge problem is that they're not just taking puberty blockers, they're like socially transitioning and getting like affirmed. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm so sorry. What the problem is, they're socially transitioning, they're getting affirmed. Like, they're gonna begin to believe it themselves. They're gonna, you know, kind of an idea from religion. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know the reference, if so, I don't know. But yeah, the majority of people that go on puberty blockers, they will continue transitioning because they also socially transition. They have however much affirmation. That's just kind of, that's how it works, unfortunately.
They merely inhibit the natural transition that a puberty would cause. And it doesn't stop it entirely. It slows it down, sometimes by up to 95%, but that's it. Puberty will still happen, just smaller. And these medicines are often less prescribed.
Is that a good thing? What are the effects of having a smaller puberty
than what people think? I think a lot of parents of trans children will be very concerned by the existence of puberty blockers, thinking that it is a gateway into transness. But oftentimes, it just gives children time. And
that's not true at all, is it? Really? The concern you've just voiced is how it is. I'm sure I've seen like research that suggested it was like 95% or something of kids end up on puberty blockers. Like, I don't know. I need to sort the shit that I have out better, because, you know, I talk about like related topics and then something else comes up and it's like, I don't have this one, but it's like, I know it though. I know it. Fuck. Anyway.
Thinking that it is a gateway into transness, but often
people on PBs are already well and through the gates. Yeah, usually they've been socially transitioned. Who's claiming PB caused transition? Is that a thing? Well, they're saying that, you know, they take them and then they end up transitioning, but they're being affirmed and shit. So it's like all of them are trans anyway. So
oftentimes it just gives children time, and they can stop them.
I don't think this is true at all. I'm sure I've seen stuff where like it was like 95% of like these kids that go on puberty blockers were transitioning.
And they can go their entire teenagehood on puberty blockers, and at the very end decide that no.
Entire teenagehood. What, so they go through puberty at fucking 20? What do you mean by teenagehood?
It's not for me. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and then you go through puberty way too late and your bones are all fucking weird potentially, and like all kinds of other things. Atrophied fucking penis that didn't fucking grow properly, which according to, listen, I just saw this on Twitter so I can't back it up, but there was like, I don't know if it was actually that Ray Alex Williams guy that was talking about like the kind of atrophy issues that you get from like puberty blockers. And then fucking Brianna Wu was like replying being like, what, atrophy of my genitals? That sounds like a good thing. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good thing, bro. Like, calm the fuck down a bit.
I think this anxiety comes from a study that sees 98% of those who finish their puberty blocker regimen.
Regarding freezing the gametes of pubertal children, how healthy are the immature gametes they collect, and how does the medical profession ethically discuss masturbation for the purpose of collection? Unfortunately, this person hasn't covered this, but those are good questions. Oh, this might be the Carmichael study. Hang on.
Their entire teenagehood on puberty blockers, and at the very end decide that, no, it's not for me.
Yeah, that sounds completely nuts. I'm sorry. What? No, just no. Your entire teenagehood. How many years are you talking about? You were saying earlier that a lot of the side effects and stuff, it depends on how long you're taking them for and to what age, which is true. I agree with that. But like, then you know that what you're just suggesting here is like not good. You know?
I don't want to do it. I think this anxiety comes from a study that sees 98% of those who finish their puberty blocker regimen to go on to transition beyond.
There we go. There we go. But they've usually already started socially transitioning.
That.
Like before the puberty blockers, there's going to be so much like affirmation going on. You start building the confirmation bias. You start building that sunk cost fallacy where you'll be year 7 or so into your transition and you'll realize that you're actually never going to look anywhere near how you want to look. And there's always going to be at least someone, maybe even just once every 6 months, but at least someone that's going to call you sir or that's going to call you madam when you don't want it. And yeah, you'll have to survive the fucking honeymoon period ending, all sorts of stuff.
The fear is that this means that children are being shuttled into transition. This is despite the alternative explanation, that those who end up not being trans simply stop taking the medication early.
Why does it have to be either of those?
To end up not being trans, 8% of those who finish their puberty blocker regimen to go on to transition beyond that. The fear is that this means that children are being shuttled into transition. This is despite the alternative explanation, that those who end up not being trans simply stop taking the medication early. Or,
well, yeah, they stopped. This could mean that they dropped out of the study. By the way, this is a similar logic. And yeah, it's 44 patients. This is a similar logic to why the detransition arguments, the detransition figures, sorry, are so unreliable. Because some people just drop out. But at the same time, I don't know. I'll think about this one more. I had a thought and it is gone.
Or never reached the threshold to be prescribed them in the first place. Since that can take several years, oftentimes the only ones who waited that.
Well, the thing is, surely they'd have a number, you know what I mean? Like, surely they'd have the initial cohort and who actually like qualified for the surgery, the study, sorry. I'm just not sure about this. Like, I'll think about it more. I can't quite express what I'm trying to say, but I think if her points hold as much weight as she wants them to, wouldn't there be better evidence for them than this? Like, this doesn't really tell me much of anything. This doesn't suggest to me that any of them, like, dropped out. You know what I mean? Yeah, 1 seized and 43 elected to start. Like, if you had a, like, cohort number, why wouldn't you be showing it? Like, this is a fairly thorough video. I'll give her that for sure. But it's, like, never thorough enough sometimes, it feels.
Entire time and finish their entire regimen.
Children who have had their puberty halted while socially transitioning are far more likely to go on cross-sex HRT. Yes, very true. And surgical intervention. Yes, very true. No wonder when your cognitive development is on pause. The cognitive stuff I need to look more into, to be honest. I've never really used that much. But I need to look more into it.
Will be those who actually are trans. This is a sign that people aren't being shuttled in. That the filter, so
is it? Jesus Christ, I keep having to skip back. I'm so sorry.
Years, oftentimes the only ones who waited that entire time and finished their entire regimen will be those who actually are trans.
Who actually are trans. By the way, there is no definition for what someone actually being trans is. It doesn't exist. You just call yourself it. That's all there is to it.
This is a sign that people aren't being shuttled in. That
I disagree with that. I think if she had better evidence for what she's saying, she would have shown it. There's no initial cohort that goes down to 44 because a bunch of them dropped out. I'd have thought that would have been available for all to see on the study. Yeah, I don't know.
Filter, so to say, is working. And even then,
I think that's extremely optimistic, and that kind of seems like someone just biased in the opposite direction. Like, I don't think that's the only alternative to thinking that people are like shoveled through the fucking system or whatever.
and you can drop out before transitioning, because puberty blockers don't actually cause any sort of biological transition to happen. For that to happen,
And we're just like spitballing. Like, yeah, obviously that's the case, but we're spitballing on like these people that, you know, at a certain point the study ends and we don't know after that, you know?
you need to take cross-sex hormones or hormone replacement therapy.
I can't really figure out this whole trans is something one is versus trans is something one does. Well, I don't know. I think there'd have to be some kind of innate thing about being trans to say that it's something you are, I guess, which is debatable. I don't know. I don't know if I'm ever going to come off the fence about that, to be honest. Like, you know, talking to Sky was really interesting because her story sounds more like someone who has something innate. And the only other real explanation is something happened so early in your life you can't remember, which, you know, you can't speculate that about someone really. So I don't know. I'll come down on one side of the fence at some point, but I mostly reject the whole kind of true trans thing.
And that typically only happens at the age of 16, whether you've been on puberty blockers or not. And you know what? You'd think that answers our question. Puberty blockers
44 seems like a small number of patients. I mean, it's transitioning kids. Like, we're never going to get very huge samples, unfortunately. And 2 years seems like it's not long enough either. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lack of follow-up is something that the cast review was very critical of. But I'm not supposed to mention the cast review because apparently not rabidly hating it is bad or something, according to retards. PB impose a DSD condition on otherwise physically healthy children. Kids who have been on PB or have certain DSDs are definitely less mature in many ways than their peers. I'd imagine, yeah. Like I said, I need to look more into it. I've seen stuff about, like, you know, other kids like noticing all their peers kind of grow past them because they're not going through puberty and stuff, and it being quite othering and isolating. But hey, it's not even just being different, it's kind of almost choosing to be different. So it's like, I don't know. Oh, thank you, Sakalo. Yeah, it was really cool to talk to her. You still don't believe in true trans. That's fair enough. I think if I were to define what true trans is to me, it would have to be something where it's like it's innate and not for any other reason, if you know what I mean. Like, you're trans because you're trans at that point, if that makes sense. And I still don't know if that's like true trans for me, but I don't know.
blockers are mostly safe, pretty much fine, on par with most medication. But hang on.
Jeez, I do not trust a fucking thing that comes out of your mouth.
That leaves us with a lot of questions. Why are puberty blockers in the news so much? Why are there court decisions? Why are states trying to ban it? Why is there...
Are we going off into conspiracy? Listen, I can stop this video anytime if that's what's going to happen, because I do not care about fucking trans conspiracy theories. Dr. Anne Lawrence has published lots of accounts of lots of AGPs whose first experience of gender issues was childhood, age 6, 7. Yeah, see, I mean, the thing is, I have the same story as a lot of those kind of AGPs, but I think I'm a trauma trans, if that makes sense. It's what makes the most sense to me anyway. And obviously not every trans person has gone through trauma, so if it is a cause, it's not the only cause. I'm not sure.
an outrage. You'd think from all of the chaos that there has been a recent study that says that puberty blockers turns children into orange goo, but that hasn't.
Yeah, because that would be what you'd need to like start realizing that this stuff's kind of crazy before you write this kind of fucking title, which, to be honest, I probably won't end up watching all of this, but like, the video is kind of better than the title. It's not terrible. I disagree with stuff, but this is not the worst fucking thing I've ever seen.
Happened. So what's the deal? And for that, we need to take a bit of a step back to become a bit more philosophical.
Happy those early days when
Oh no, we're hearing philosophy tube. Listen, this video is not the worst thing I've ever seen. There's definitely a lot of stuff I don't agree with. There's a lot of stuff I think probably could have gone further, if you know what I mean. I think ultimately this kind of progressive trans thought cult thing. It's gotten worse over time. She's saying something in this video which you can't even get people to say nowadays, such as precocious puberty and trans kids aren't the same fucking thing. But yeah, I'm not listening to fucking philosophy tube. I'm sorry. If you're gonna start playing music and doing philosophy tube impressions, I am out. I am out, unfortunately. But yeah, there we go. Puberty blockers are safe as far as we know, except that maybe they're not. But get over it anyway. Mia Mulder, there we go. Amazing.